Hey, what's up, good people? This is Pastor Small reaching out to you. Hope you're having a blessed week so far. We're doing something a little bit different, kind of putting a little fireside chat to this, kind of an office, more intimate feel to our Bible study. But nonetheless, we hope that you'll be blessed by it. We hope it'll be a good lesson for you. We've been talking about this whole idea, how you're living, and trying to process what it is to engage in this culture of COVID-19 as we interact with folks who we may be quarantined in close quarters with, and understanding ourselves and them just a little bit better. So we learn how to manage and how to operate in the right kind of spaces. And so today we're going to talk about, like we talked about and promised last week, we're going to talk about communication. We're going to look at what it means to communicate and what it means to speak and talk with a sense of dialogue to each other. Now, understand that when we talk about these kinds of things, it's just about our reflection, just about our sense of understanding, and just seeing how we better understand ourselves and how we interact, maybe in our houses, maybe in the close spaces or places where we're working, or things and what's going on, so that we can make better choices about how we talk. And hopefully and prayerfully, this will be a blessing to maybe your marriages, maybe your couple relationships, maybe your children and parental relationships, and all of those kinds of things. And we want to make sure that we are a blessing and helping you out. This just isn't specifically for couples. This is just how we communicate, and understanding how we communicate in general, and how and what God has to say, what the scriptures speak to us in terms of spirit, and how we relate to each other. Because after all, we are all created for communication. We're created for relationship. You've heard me say that a dozen times before. We're created for relationship. And so based upon our relationship, and it's about how we connect with each other. One of the most famous scriptures that we've heard, particularly during wedding season or relationship season, comes from 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, and verses 4-7 says that love is patient and love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. And so we understand that this relationship, as we talk about spending time and how we communicate, really ought to be based on a sense of wanting better, right? We want a good outcome to happen in regards to our communication. It is more than, and we'll talk about this in a little while, but it is more than just getting what you want. Communication is more than just getting what you want. That's a salesman. A salesman operates and functions in a way to get what they want. But in relationship, it's deeper than that. It's not just about getting what you want or coming to a conclusion, but it's also about how we maintain and stay connected and stay in healthy relationship with one another. Because the communication ultimately is work. We automatically assume that because we know how to talk, meaning we know how to articulate, we know how to put words together, we know how to put sentences together, we operate with a certain level of syntax, we automatically think that we know how to communicate. Now, we're all communicators, but one of the things we need to understand is that communication is a skill set. That to understand how to communicate, it's a skill set. And so many of us need to work on the communication skill set of how we talk and how we articulate and express our feelings through words and through our verbal and nonverbal cues. And so it's going to be important to understand that it's not something you just know how to do, that everybody does not know how to do it. Even if you're talkative, even if you're a talker, it doesn't mean that you know how to communicate effectively with everyone, because everybody has different receptors and everybody receives things differently. I think a couple of weeks ago, I used the example of my sister-in-law as she was talking about and gave me the lesson of the boxing interpreter. I talked about how she said that when the two were communicating, the boxer and the trainer, and the interpreter in TV land was interpreting what they were saying, how he was chopping up what they were saying, and it was really kind of incomplete, and he was kind of summing it up. And what I said a couple of weeks ago is that we need to know that our own communicators, our own tools, that how we hear and how we talk, we have a tendency to chop up language. We have a tendency to chop up verbiage. We have a tendency to cut things up. And so what we're talking about is how we can be better, effective communicators in sharing our feelings, sharing our concerns. And because we're in close quarters, because we're in the houses together, because we're spending a whole lot more time with one another, that can be one of those things that can be helpful to understanding, how we function and what we need to do. But we want to do it in a spirit and in a way that is beneficial for the collective, for the whole, and for the family. And so we need to understand that how we talk, how we articulate is effective to get things done. Now, some of y'all are saying, well, Pastor, when it comes to kids, I don't do all of that. That's, folks for a different family. That's a different culture. What I say goes, you do what I say. This isn't a lesson or a critique on your parenting skill. What it is for you to understand that there may be better ways to effectively communicate what you need to communicate with your children, with your spouse, with your family members, so that they can hear what you're saying, so that they can be more receptive and more active. Folks can do stuff, but it doesn't mean that relationship is maintained, right? We have this big idea of, having control. Well, we need to know that control does not always connect or attribute itself or lead to connection, right? That there are people who can do what you say, but it doesn't mean you've connected to them in a significant way, right? Control and connection are not mutually combined or automatically combined based upon relationship connection, right? We have those who communicate, right? And we do things because they say we need to do them, because it affects our job, because it has some type of ulterior effect, because it gets something in the long run. But those people who command or try to control us does not mean that we have connection. Right? They're bosses that bark orders and yell and shout things, but it doesn't mean we're connected to them. It doesn't mean that there's a healthy connection. Same thing can happen with children. Same thing can happen with our children. We can bark orders and say things to them and holler at them and yell at them and threaten them and all those kinds of things. But it does not mean that there's healthy connection. And so we have to understand, even in our marital relationships or in our romantic relationships, that having a sense of control does not mean that you're connected, right? You can still be bossy and not be connected. You can be bossy and not really have meaningful relationship. And you can fool yourself and think that everybody loves you because they're doing what they want you to do. But it does not mean that you ultimately have tangible and meaningful relationship that can ultimately feed your soul. And so we want to make sure that we listen to what we interpret and not just what you say, right? But it's also about, like we said, how you hear. We want to understand the significance and the importance of how you hear, how you listen, and how you take in information. And we're going to try to give you some skills to talk about how you manage and put those things together. You want to understand how we hear, how we put things together, and how we articulate those things, because we all hear differently. You can we can all hear the same thing and all get different interpretations from it, right? We can hear the same thing and be like, ooh, wait a minute, that was a little shade, or ooh, they were trying to be helpful, or ooh, I didn't see anything wrong with it, or ooh, nah, they were trying to be funny, right? People can hear different things, and because of our own internal interpreters and our own internal feelings and our own internal insecurities and our own internal jealousies and our own internal everything else is, we can get kind of jammed up in how we interpret. So it's important for us to get clarity in our communication. It's important for us to articulate ourselves in a way that we can better understand what people are trying to convey and what people are trying to share with us. So what I'm going to do first, though, I'm going to give you 8 different kind of communication personalities, and we'll kind of brush through those and The disclaimer is the same as last week. I don't want you sitting in there talking about, oh yeah, that's you, or yeah, that's you. I don't want you to do that. I want you to be reflective enough. You can have some conversation later, but I want you to be reflective enough that you're not judging or pointing fingers at people around you. That when you who are listening or sharing in this, I want you to be reflective and kind of hear where yourself might pop up. Okay, so first kind of communication personality is the indecisive one. All right. They're insecure. They got a whole lot of doubts. The points, they take careful attention to dedicate to understand them fully. So you're gonna hear them ask a lot of questions over and over and over again. They might compare lots of different things. They might operate with a sense of a whole lot of information. The indecisive one, that's the person who goes to the supermarket and they put all the items in their basket before they buy them, and then they put the ones there they don't want back. They're going to get everything, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to put all the stuff back, okay? So it can be kind of difficult to communicate because if you offer a strong point of view to show that you're sure about something, because they can get kind of bent out, they can get insecure and cling to your sense of confidence, even if you're not telling the truth, right? And I'm not saying that they're gullible, but because you say it with such conviction, it can draw certain people in. So you want to help them in their own coming to conclusion. You want to help them gather the information that they kind of need. This is important in communication because some people need more information. They're just kind of built like that. We can analyze why that is, but there are a lot of people who kind of need more information and their reasons. So you want to listen attentively, and you don't want to make them kind of feel bad about their indecisiveness. You don't want to make them feel bad that they can't make an immediate decision. They need more information to do that. They may tend to overanalyze, but they'll focus on things and not focus on stuff that's not relevant. They'll be like, hey, what's the point of really talking about this? What's the point? Get to the chase. But you don't want to rush them, because rushing them will cause them more anxiety, and it'll take even longer to get to conclusions. The next one is the silent one. We've all kind of been involved. A lot of times we get blamed as men for this one. We don't offer up any clues. I'm talking about the silent ones, not men in general, but we don't offer any clues about the emotions, whether it's positive or negative. We can kind of be indifferent about it. See, there I go again. The silent one kind of keeps it all inside, doesn't say very much. They kind of observe, just kind of analyze. Y'all know those people. They're not going to say a whole lot, but they're going to watch everything. And here's what I find fascinating about the silent ones in terms of communication. They've got a really good mastery of people because they study. They can really tell, where people are and what's going on. And for them, it's really about who to trust, who to connect to, and who they can engage with. And the best way to communicate with that type is to take, to be very friendly, to be very patient and very open with them, and show interest. And because you got to get them to a place of being comfortable enough to have conversation. And you want to ask closed questions with them. Closed questions are going to be imperative. Closed questions are like yes or no questions, right? Because if you ask them to elaborate, they're going to withdraw. They're going to go into their shell. So you want to make sure that you kind of get some yes and no's from them as you build relationship and connection. The next one is the egocentric communicator. And this type, we've all been around this person. This person thinks they know everything, and they project a real strong opinion regardless of the topic of conversation. Whatever you're talking about, they know something about it. They're experts on it. They can act superior. They don't accept advice very well. They try to control every situation. Their communication can be toxic because they can kind of put down where others are and what people are doing and how they function. And so how to communicate with this kind of person is really kind of delicate. You got to really kind of back up your facts and what you know. and be able to support that. And it's also important that you kind of assert yourself with the egocentric, that you really kind of know and that you kind of stand your ground, so to speak, in terms of how you interact with them in order to facilitate positive interaction. They recognize and will acknowledge, that kind of assertiveness and that kind of strength because it's something that they believe they see in themselves and it represents a certain sense of confidence that they admire. Don't avoid with them kind of abruptly interrupting conversations. Don't argue with them, the egocentric, and don't show impatience with them because they'll it'll create, you'll get off topic and you move off topic with those kinds of individuals. So it's about knowing how to be engaged and knowing how to let things play out. But again, to know your own self, to know what it is to be true, what it is that you're going to stick with and stand with in terms of those conversations. Number 4 is the reflective one. The reflective one is a personality that tries to find a wealth of information about the topic that you're talking about. When you communicate with this person, it's kind of like almost like the indecisive. You got to be patient. You got to kind of be patient because they'll receive information and they're going to present it objectively. They're going to do it like a reporter, right? Or like a reporter should. Reporters nowadays, they always have a subjective angle, but a reporter is supposed to be objective. Like this is the information and I don't feel either way about it, right? That's how the reflective is going to go. The reflective is going to, they're going to get this information and they're still going to be like, well, I don't have an opinion on it yet. I don't have a focus on it yet. And so you need to give them time to think and adapt and process for the rhythm of what they want to find in terms of a fluid conversation. Don't pressure, don't give them too much pressure either, because pressure, they're not best when you rush them and they choose one option or another. Some of y'all, know this person at restaurants, they never know what they want. There's too many options, those kind of things, that kind of thing. They're always processing, and so it's like, Sinbad, the comedian, used to say, the menu of McDonald's ain't changed in 60 years, but somebody's still going to go up there and go, I ain't really, it's that kind of thing. So you have to operate with a level of patience and keeping people on topic. Number 5 is the conversationalist. And this person loves to talk about any and everything. This is the person in the supermarket. This is the person in line at the movies. This is the person at the funeral, right? This is the person going to talk about anything. They can jump from one conversation with another without skipping a beat. This is the ADD person. They're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things. You know what I mean? I identify with this cat, because it's like squirrel, you know what I mean? And they're going off. So it's important to pay close attention to them. When they talk, they're always interested in what others have to say. They're the question people, those folks is question. So where did you go to college? So what did you do? Hey, so what do you think about? They're going to be the ones who are always probing. So you got to stay on track with concrete points with the person who's the conversationalist, and main enthusiasm. Don't appear tired or bored because they'll shut down and disconnect. The argumentative one. Don't look at anybody, just keep focusing at the computer or your phone right now. But the argumentative one is a difficult personality type. They enjoy contradicting. They love to argue about everything. This is the cat that you see in the beauty parlor or the barbershop. That cat, right? That, the one that whatever it is, they got something to say about it. And sometimes it's not even, the crazy thing about the argumentative one is it's not even that they really disagree with you, but they just want to keep the conversation going in a place of tension and conflict. It can feel really toxic sometimes. Because they're trying to get emotion from you, right? Be that confused, be it guilty, be it that you submit or subdue or just go to that will, right? That's what it ultimately comes about. And it can be frustrating for them when you don't do that, when you don't let into those kinds of things. You got to stand up for yourself with argumentative ones. You got to stand up and you can make sure that your opinions are not tied to your ego. And you got to avoid arguments at the same time. When they try to be sarcastic, they're going to try to be critical. They're going to try to trip you up, and you got to know how to just not even get caught up in those things. I got some friends from college, who kind of operate in that. And, when they get under your skin, it's a joy to them. When they get you worked up, then it's funny. But you got to be, you got to be careful about how you navigate with those kinds of people. And I've learned that when I don't give them that energy, we move on to something else or it dies out. Number 7 is the shy one. These are reserved people. These are the people when you're conversing, they don't look you in the eye. They keep far away who they're talking to. They're hunched sometimes, they head down, turn around, you got to kind of force them to look at you that kind of way. It's hard for them to ask questions because they're afraid of being made fun of. They think their questions won't be any good. They're anxious in conversation because they think and believe that they're not really good at it. But you can make them feel more secure by encouraging them and talking to them, offering advice, focusing on the positive, talk about things that they want to talk about, maintaining calm, being relaxed, not being, too frazzled or anxious or upset because, they're doing that kind of thing. Give them time to process, really move. In terms of their mental sense of understanding and how they function in terms of their dialogue, and they become more conversant as time goes on. And the final one, number 8, is the skeptic. This type can also be kind of toxic. They're always on the defensive. They're emphasizing negative. It's hard to see positive in stuff. Everything is a problem. Those folk, in ministry, you see those people all the time, right? Doesn't matter what it is. Whenever you talk about it, they move to the negative of it. I don't know how that's going to work because, you have to look at this, you have to consider this, and and it's like, there's no positive win. Like, we can get this done, or make this happen. There are folks who are always doing that. And, you kind of get to almost like the argumentative one, right? That there is no kind of hope in that piece. The skeptic kind of reminds me of Debbie Downer. Those of y'all who ever watch Saturday Night Live, if you ever get a chance to see a Debbie Downer clip, it's hilarious. But Debbie Downer, she was that kind of chick that just was like, nothing worked. Everything was a problem. Nothing. There was no sunny side to anything. And so you got to remain objective when you're dealing with those kind of folk. Keep the conversation, not to give them the opportunity to misinterpret what you say. Give them the tendency in the room to understand for themselves, because this kind of individual can make a mountain out of a molehill. They can make something bigger than it's supposed to be. We'd like to call it a kind of a drama queen kind of situation, but they can really blow that thing up. So you got to be kind of patient. You got to, again, know who you are. You have to kind of really remain calm and know how to leave the conversation, since doing that will only reinforce that they don't get enough attention ultimately through it all. And so, when you take a look at those and examine yourselves, maybe you find yourself in there. I'm sure you're in there somewhere. But also make sure that, like I said, you're not pointing the finger at somebody else, because there's always 3 pointing back at you. So you want to be careful about that. But you may want to converse and dialogue with your family, your spouse or your relationship partner, and dialogue with that and see about where you guys fit in those kind of descriptions. But we also want to talk about just a little bit about gender and how we converse about gender. So real quick, there's a book called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. I use it often in my training. And I've talked about it a few times before. And what they do, Bill and Pam Farrell do in this book, is they talk about the different ways that we interpret. So men, we operate like waffles. Waffles, when you look at waffles, they have the boxes, and we operate in terms of our waffles one box at a time. So that's how men function. So we do things one thing at a time. We give all the attention to one thing at a time. And here's the thing about it. It takes men a minute to come out of one box to another. We got a lot of boxes. Men got a lot of boxes. We got work boxes. We got, hanging out with the fellas box. We got a sports center box. We got, doing the laundry box. We got, taking the kids out box. We got doctor's appointment boxes. We got, landscaping and cutting the grass box. We got housework box. We got different boxes, all these different boxes. And when we're in a box, we're in a box. And it just takes us a minute to come out of one and move to the other. And so when you talk to us, and we're in bill paying box, and we're talking about paying bills, and we just had a conversation about that, and you switch to, family reunion or going to dinner with some friends box, it takes us a minute to adjust and shift because we do those things one thing at a time. We kind of evolve one thing at a time. And so that's how we process, right? So literally, and I'm trying to help some of y'all ladies out. So literally when you talking to your sons or your husbands or male figures, and they watching the game or they watching something on TV, and you say, "Hey, come take this garbage out," and they're like, "All right, I'm coming," and they still just kind of like zoned out. It's taking them a second, right? They understand the process, they understand what has to be done, but it's going to take a second, right? And you say, like, "I asked you 5 minutes ago," that means nothing. Right? Because it takes a minute, it takes a process to do that because there's something else that's about to shift. That's how men operate and how men function. Women, as the book says, are like spaghetti. And y'all know how spaghetti looks on a plate. It's all interacted. It's all mixed up. It's all caught up. And nowadays, we call it multitasking. And so the thread continues to move, right? It continues to connect to everything, and everything is linked to everything else. And so we can talk about how to pay the bills, and then we can talk about how to go out with the friends, and then we can talk about what needs to happen with the kids, and then we can talk about what's going on at church, and then we can talk about what's going on with our parents, and then we need to talk about what's going on with taxes, then we need to talk about what's going on with COVID-19, and then we can talk about what's going on, we need to clean the house, and then we need to talk about what's going on with paying the car note, and then we need to, and so it's all connected, and it takes men slower to process all of that, right? And so we still on the first thing you were talking about. Right? We still on the first thing. You asked us if we took the garbage out, and then 5 minutes later, you're literally on 3 different subjects down, and we like, oh, where this come from? And it's not right, wrong, or indifferent. Neither of them is wrong, and neither of them is right. It's just about how it is. It's just about how men and how women are built. And so we want you to just understand that in terms of communication. That it's not that somebody is dullard. It's not that somebody is, stupid, and not somebody is, over emotional. It's just how people are built and how they process and how they go through their communication things. And so we need to understand that the whole intention, like I said earlier, is that we're built for relationship, right? That we're built for relationship, and our assignment is to be connected, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10 says, 2 are better than 1, right? Because they have good returns for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up, right? That we're talking about the writer is talking about the importance of partnership and what partnership means and what connection means and what it is to have help. And so even in our communication, we're looking to help each other grow, looking to help each other understand and be fuller and be more whole as people. And it's dangerous sometimes because some of us come from households and some of us come from culture, our subculture in terms of our family of origin. Some of us come from some places where we believe that control is ultimately the point. Well, what we want to do is be in control. And so how we want to control, we argue till we're blue in the face until somebody sees it a particular way, right? So we feel that we have to argue, and that we operate from this place of arguing and being difficult and operating in this place where we got to force the point, right? And sometimes some of us have experienced this. Some people won't let you go. Some people won't leave you alone. Some people won't drop it until you say, okay. And then they feel like there's some sense of accomplishment. But again, all of that control has done damage to connection. And so Galatians chapter 4, verse 17 says, those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want is to alienate you from us so that you may have zeal for them And so the writer of Galatians is ultimately talking about this idea of separation, right? It wants you to change your loyalty, right? They want you to change your loyalty. These folks who are believers are listening to false teachers in Galatia. And the writer is saying, listen, be careful about these false teachers because they want to alienate you. They want to pull you away so that you have zeal for them, right? There's some people who can't function unless they think they have your entire devotion. They got all your devotion. It's not about thinking for yourself. It's not about having your own thought, not about having your own idea, right? But it's about making sure that somehow or another you're with them or you're agreeing with them in every sense of the way. Some people see that as what relationship is, and it's unfortunate, but it did not change or develop from their childhood, that they think that meaning you have to do everything in order for me to believe that you are somehow connected to me. A lot of us experienced that when we were young. You know, when we were kids, we had friends or we had people in the neighborhood say, well, if you don't do that, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to be your friend, right? But a lot of times, many of us grew out of that. But the reality is that sometimes some people did not. And some people still believe that in order to be connected, in order to be in relationship, in order to be balanced, in order to be well, that it means that you have to do everything that somebody wants you to do. And that's not relationship, that's control, right? And so when we understand what that really means and what it is to be whole, we understand that it's not about controlling people or manipulating people, because people can be very, very manipulative with their communication and with their language. It's dangerous to do things for personal gain. James 3:16. This is my favorite 3:16. Don't get me wrong. I love John 3:16, but James 3:16 says, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." We need to say that again. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. That if there is no integrity in terms of communication, if there's no integrity in terms of relationship, what will take place is disorder. What will take place is manipulation. It's very important to understand that. I tell couples, I kind of give couples this kind of idea to understand that many of us in our culture, we have heard the term pick your battles, right? Folks are going to tell you, need to know how to pick your battles. You know how to, pick your battles, make sure you pick your battles. But you can't, if you're talking about battle and you're talking about warfare language, then what you're saying is somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And when you're talking about relationship, it's not about winning or losing. It's about how we become better. How our relationship, whatever the relationship is, be it marriage relationship, be it parent and child relationship, be it friend relationship, whatever the relationship may be it parental relationship with adult children, whatever it is, that it might become whole and become better through the process, right? And that doesn't mean it doesn't require work, doesn't mean it doesn't require places where things get rocky or people's feelings get hurt or sensitive or bumped. But it does mean that at the end of it, my intention is not to hurt you. My intention is not to do damage to you. My intention is that you would move and operate and fulfill your fullest self. And so to do that, it's not about manipulation. And so what I encourage couples to always do is to try to work and operate in terms of what's best for the relationship, right? And so you want to kind of look at those things in that regard, because if you don't, you start to manipulate, you start to bring old stuff up, you start to maneuver, you start to lie, you start to say things that you can't take back, and it becomes a lot dangerous in terms of how your relationship gets affected. And so you have to learn how not to let things get to a place where they're for only personal gain, right? Particularly in relationship. They can't just be for personal gain. You want the person that you are speaking to and the person you're in relationship with to be whole as well. And if you don't want the people you're in relationship to be whole and be their best selves, then you need to examine a lot of different things. And that's a whole different Bible study. But we have to learn how to think things through. That our assignment is to learn and process and how to think certain ideas and certain things through. That there's a lot of times when we speak before we think and we don't react in that thing, right? So Proverbs 29 verse 11 says, "Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end." Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. That it's easy to go fly off the handle. It's easy to lose it. It's easy to get caught up in your emotions, right? We can talk about, the balance of our emotions and what that means, but it's easy to fly off the handle. It's easy to get wrapped up in emotion and say, well, that's just me. That's just me. That's just me. You have to understand people have reaction to that. It always fascinates me when people say, yo, that's just who I am. Okay, well, that might be who you are, but it does not mean that people don't have their own personal investment and their own personal right to respond, right? It always bugs me out when people do something or say something slick, and then somebody says something back, and then they're offended, right? It's like, oh, well, why are you doing that? Well, you can't say what you say and not expect me to respond how I feel to what you said, right? That's why we have to make clear in terms of our communication what we mean, so that we articulate better, so that we ultimately end up with whole and more complete relationship. Right. So we have to operate with a sense of humility. We have to make room. We have to give opportunity for people to grow, to connect. And so that means that we have to, in a sense, check our own selves. We got to check our own identities. We got to check who we are. We got to check and understand, that it's not always about us. It ain't always about what you want. It's not always about everything that goes on with you. It's not always about you, right? We need to understand that. And so we have to make room for that. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5 says, in the same way, you who are younger, he said, submit yourselves to your elders, that all of you clothe yourselves in humility towards one another, right? That what we talk about a lot of times is, folks, about the whole respect elders thing, and ain't nobody mad at that. But in reality, what Peter goes on to say, is that clothe yourselves, all of you, clothe yourselves in humility towards one another. That ultimately you want to talk about what that relationship is, what that connection is, so that you can continue to grow. And so that you aren't doing damage to one another, but you're leaving room for people to operate and function with a sense of dignity. We have to talk about what we're doing in terms of how we move towards better communication. How do we communicate better? How do we operate in those places to where we offer better communication, particularly in the settings that we're in right now, right? Particularly in your homes, in your self-quarantines, in your places where you have all of these things going on. How do you better communicate, right? There's people going in and out of refrigerators, people eating up all the food, people not cleaning up behind themselves, right? How do we begin to work this? Well, first and foremost, there has to be a level of respect. You want to have a level of respect. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12 says, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this is what sums up the law and the prophets. Right at the end of the day, that golden rule, which we're so familiar of, right? If you want to be treated with respect, you have to give respect. If you want to be treated with dignity, you have to give dignity. You can't start off, brothers and sisters, beating people up. You can't start off flying off the handle, right? Because whenever you do that, I'm telling you, whenever you do that, you're going to get a reaction. Now, the reaction might be to withdraw. The reaction might be to engage, but you're going to get a reaction, right? And what you want is to make sure that it's a healthy reaction, right? That ultimately the two people understand where they're coming from, right? So you want to come with a sense of respect. You also want to come with a sense of reason. 1 Peter chapter 3:15 says, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord, and always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. People are going to ask you about your perspective. Well, why do you do that? Well, why do you feel that way? Or why do you want to do that, right? And we sometimes as people offer that up without even asking, right? Without people asking us, we tell people how we feel. A lot of people do that. But it needs to be done with a sense of gentleness and respect. It needs to go with a sense of connection, right? So that people can actually hear what's being said, right? We want to talk about, and we've talked about this a little bit, giving attention. Listening is giving attention with your ears. You want to have people listen to you, not just hear you. You want people to actually listen to what you're saying so they can actually benefit, and the relationship can benefit as a result. You want to go through things as you want to have a certain sense of respect. You want to have a sense of reason. But you also want to operate with the proper attitude. You want to enter with the proper attitude. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves." Right? So when you're communicating, you want to make sure, one of the things I tell couples and one of the things I tell people is first look to understand, then be understood. Right? That's what you want to do. That when you're in conversation, when you're in concert, when you're trying to get to places with people, seek to understand first. Right? I want to understand what it is you need. I want to understand where you're coming from. Right? From both parties, seek to understand first and then look to be understood. That if you seek to understand first, then you can get a better picture and perspective of where somebody's coming from. See, oftentimes the problem is we don't care where people are coming from, right? And we can spend a whole lot of time talking about that, right? We got a country right now, Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberals, all of those kinds of things. And we don't know where each other is coming from. We assume, right? But to understand where people are coming from helps us to understand their perspective and why they're approaching things the way they're approaching it. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with them. Doesn't mean you're going to end up in the same place all the time, but it does mean that you will approach how you go about and how you deal with them differently if you're genuinely interested in connection, genuinely interested in relationship. One of the important things in communication, one of the most important things for real in communication is what's the point, right? Have a goal, right? What are we talking about? Right? I mean, there's all types of conversations and banters and stuff that go on. We can talk about sports. We can talk about Michael Jordan. We can talk about, the ESPN special. We can talk about a whole bunch of different things and joke around. We can talk about who gets drafted, who don't get drafted. We can talk about what team going to the Super Bowl, Philadelphia Eagles. We can talk about all of that kind of stuff, right? But what the whole idea at the end of the day is, what's the point? Right? Particularly when you're talking about significant things or relationship or family or things that really, really matter. What's the point? What's the end game? What are we trying to get to? Sometimes people fuss just to be heard. Sometimes people get into situations just so they can feel a sense of control. Sometimes people make noise. Again, and this comes from a lot of people's childhood, we make noise because that's how we get attention, right? I do some work in the jail, right? And I was talking to one of the inmates the other day, and Kat said to me, man, he said, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to get that. I said, yo, my dude, it's not going to happen for you. It's not going to happen like that. It's not going to happen like you think. He was like, yeah, but I got a mental health issue. I said, yo, a lot of people in here got mental health issues. It's not going to go that way for you. And he literally said, see, man, if I start acting up, if I start knocking people out, if I start throwing stuff around, acting like I'm crazy, then y'all going to pay me attention. And I said, dude, that's not the attention you want. But the reality is, that's how a lot of people function. That's how a lot of people operate. That the only reason you paying attention to me is because I'm acting like this. The only reason you giving me attention is because I'm acting up. The only reason you giving me this attention is because I'm doing something that's out of control. And you have to understand that there are better ways to communicate, because that's not the kind of attention that ultimately sustains. It's not the kind of attention that ultimately helps. I told this dude, I said, okay, so you do that. I said, and they put you in a funny suit, then they lock you away and put you off by yourself. Is that the kind of attention that you want to get? Is that what you're looking to get? Right? It's not going to foster the kind of result that you want. Even if it's temporary, it won't be enough. So you want to make sure that you understand, what's the point? What are we getting to? What is the conclusion of what it is we need to do? And so Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 25 says, but the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Right? Those who belong to Christ and crucified in the flesh with his passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. that we want to make sure that we understand that we're operating with these attributes of gentleness and self-control and goodness and faithfulness and kindness and joy and peace and love. We want to make sure that those things are demonstrated. Yes, it can get hard. Yes, when we get frustrated. Yes, it takes some time for us to gather, but we need to understand that our assignment is to ultimately get to a particular goal. And we need to know what that goal is. Even in our places of frustration, we need to know what the goal is. Okay, the goal is I don't want to be frustrated like this anymore. Or the goal is I need a behavior to change. I need a behavior to adjust. I need us to do some changes and some adjustments so that this doesn't happen again. That's how we properly communicate with each other. All right. And one of the things of how we have effective communication is you got to be an active listener. Right? You have to be active in your listening. We talked about that. You have to be a listener, right? Give attention with the ear, right? Proverbs 18 verse 13 says to answer before listening, that is folly and shame, right? To answer before listening is folly and shame, right? To run to a place where you trying to get the answer, right? Where you trying to get to the place where you summed it up because your interpreter has told you something and you try to sum it up before it actually happens, you have ultimately done damage, right, to the thing that you're trying to achieve, right? That you're talking before you actually know what's going to be said or what the conclusion is or what the point is, right? You have to understand what the process of communication looks like. You have to understand that communication in all of its forms is ultimately about articulating where we are in ourself. That's verbal and nonverbal, right? Verbal and nonverbal communication. James chapter 1 verse 19 says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Everyone should be slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Right? Quick to listen. You want to make sure that you're hearing perspective, hearing where people come from. And a lot of times we don't reward that, right? Our culture, our society doesn't reward that because we're in the society of immediate protest. We're in the society of cancel culture. We're in the society of shouting because we're upset about something or protesting or yelling at the top of our lungs or, Facebooking it or Instagramming it or tweeting it because it's easy. It's easy to get your voice out there. But what we have not done is done very much listening. And so we need to listen. We need to understand. And some things might be difficult. Some things might be challenging for some people. There might be a reason that somebody cannot do what you're expecting them to do. There might be a reason, like internally, like genuinely an emotive reason that makes something difficult, not impossible, but difficult for them to do. And so as somebody who cares about somebody else, you want to find out what that is. You want to get to that particular point. Maybe communication wasn't rewarded when they were growing up. Right? Maybe that wasn't what people did. Maybe just people did, right? It was like, well, I don't really talk a lot. I just kind of do, right? Maybe a lot of times it's like, well, I feel better writing. Okay, well, writing is communication, but it's not the best form of communication because I can see it and I can get it from you immediately. And so you want to understand what people are coming from. You want to be quick to listen. But you want to be slow to speak and slow to become angry. Angry doesn't solve the situation, right? Angry doesn't get you to the place necessarily that you're trying to get to. And I'm not telling you not to be angry. I'm telling you to channel your anger in healthy ways so that you can articulate it in a way that person can receive it, right? Because if all I'm doing is shouting, sooner or later, this person is going to do one or two things. They're going to walk out forever or they're going to shout back, right? Or they're going to deal with you in doses. Right. And that's what happens in family reunions. Right. People get together, people start fussing, and people are like, all right, I'm out. I've had enough of this. Right. So we need to understand how to articulate it. So we got to be quick to listen, but we got to be kind of slow to speak. And listen, take your time. Right. And articulate and stuff. But don't be so quick to jump off the handle or go after somebody or to read somebody and do all those kinds of things. In fact, you want to take time. You want to take breaks if you have to, right? Give yourself time. Give yourself a day. Give yourself 48 hours. There's something called the 48-hour rule, that if something has happened and it makes you immediately angry, give yourself time. And if you still, after you've calmed down, still want to articulate it, then you articulate it, but you articulate it in a different way. right? You articulate it not in the heat of the moment, but you articulate it in a different way so that you're clearer and that you're more fluid about it. And if you don't, and if it's not that angry, if it's not important enough to bring up 24, 48 hours later, then you need to leave it alone, right? Don't bring it up again. If it happens again, don't bring it up again. In that particular, you can bring up that new instance, but don't bring up the old one, because somebody, you know what they're going to say. They say, well, you ain't saying nothing the last time, right? So you want to make sure that you're articulating in healthy ways, but you want to make sure that you're taking a break. You want to make sure that you're stepping away. There's nothing wrong with taking a break. There's nothing wrong with stepping away. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we need to take a break from this. You know what, we need to stop talking about this because we might say something we might regret. Somebody's feelings might get hurt. Things, things can go to the left, things decide, go sideways, and that's not what we want. So there's nothing wrong with taking a breath, and there's nothing wrong with taking a minute. Life has taught me that it will be there tomorrow. Life has taught me that it will be there tomorrow. So you want to make sure that you're articulating things in a responsible way. And you got to be willing to work with people. Be willing to actually work with people, right? Understand that everything isn't going to go the way you want it to go. You have to be flexible, right? You got to operate with a level of flexibility. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. That's Romans chapter 12, verse 10, right? Be devoted to one another in love and honor one another above yourselves. Another translation of that says, try to outdo each other, right? In other words, let ego go. Don't get caught up in ego. If there's something that requires apology, apologize. There's no skin off your neck. There's no power lost in terms of apologizing. In fact, you actually gain power because you don't let it consume you. You don't let it keep you. Speak to a sense of knowing how to apologize. I didn't know, and apologizing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've done something wrong, right? It just means that you're sorry or you're apologetic that somebody's feelings was hurt. I did not mean to offend you there. I did not mean, I'm sorry that you were upset about that. I'm sorry that you were offended by that. That was not my intention. But to apologize, we've in this country, in this culture, have taken apology to mean that there was something mean-spirited behind it. And that's not necessarily what it is. I can apologize because, I stepped on your foot. That wasn't my intention, but when I was walking, things happened and, your foot got stepped on. I apologize. I'm sorry. I apologize that hurt you. I'm sorry that I was uncomfortable, right? It doesn't mean I did it intentionally, and it doesn't take anything from me. So I didn't know how to outdo each other, right? To be bigger than the moment, to look at what the common good is and what you're actually shooting for, and know how to work together. And finally, in terms of working together, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 says, finally, to all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. That you want to operate in this place to where you just, that humility matters, that you're not in this thing for power. You're not in this thing, particularly when you're talking about family and talking about being connected. You're not in this thing to, win. You're in this ultimately, particularly if you're talking about family, you're talking about relationships that mean something to you, or what it is to ultimately give God glory with the work that you do. That you work towards a common goal, that you understand the responsibility and the love and the commitment that you have to each other. And so in this season, as you are, talking to people and somebody says something, what I want you to do is this exercise. I've talked about it before. I want you to practice it. So if you are, kind of confused about what people are saying, I kind of want you to, use this. First of all, I want you to use I statements. Don't be blasting people and knocking people over, right? Use your I statements or your we statements, right? Instead of saying, you don't spend no time with me, you don't do nothing, or you don't do this, or you don't do that, right? Instead of doing that, say, I feel that not enough time, we're not spending enough time together, right? Take onus, do I statements, because that takes pressure off the person and the individual feeling attacked. This is how I feel. I'm feeling this. Now, don't be manipulative and say, I feel that you don't never do nothing. No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to be more creative. You have to use your imagination in terms of how you articulate and how you talk, right? So, I feel that, there's a lot of work that's being done, and I'm doing, a vast majority of it. I feel that, I was mistreated in that process, and I believe that, I saw that going differently, right? Ownership in terms of how you feel, right? Because the reality is nobody's making you feel anything, right? We like to use that term, but nobody's making you feel anything. You feel it for a whole bunch of reasons. You feel it because you didn't get enough hugs as a kid. You feel it because, you were bullied in school. You feel it because you don't feel a certain amount of love. You feel it because you feel it because you feel it because. But you feel it, right? It's your feeling. So you have to own it. And so you don't want to attack people and start doing a whole bunch of this, but you want to own it, right? And give people our opportunity to articulate what they feel or how they can help, right? Okay, well, I don't want you to feel like that. I don't want you to feel like you're doing the most. I don't want you to feel like you're doing everything. How can I help you? Or what does it need that you could feel like I'm contributing? What will happen to make you feel like this is different? How can I help this situation, right? You move to a different kind of place. Another technique is, as you use the I statements, I want you to operate in the place of getting clarity. Clarity is important. And one of the techniques for clarity is, so what I'm hearing you say is, right? Always make sure you get a sense of clarity. So what I'm hearing you say is, right? And give that person opportunity to say, no, that's not what I'm saying, right? If somebody keeps saying to you, I think I said this before, if somebody says to you all the time, yo, nah, you missed it. Oh, nah, that's not what I was saying. Oh, nah, that's not what I meant. You're probably not doing a good job of listening, right? You're probably so ready to engage. You're probably so ready to get in it. You're not paying attention, listening, and hearing what somebody's saying, right? You probably already summed up your interpreters working overtime. And so what I'm saying is, instead of saying, oh, you saying I'm fat? Oh, you saying I'm ugly? No, what I'm saying is, I don't think that's the right shirt that goes to that outfit. Right? Right? Give the person opportunity for clarity instead of jumping in, and then people get to a place where they get defensive, and then you get into a whole different kind of thing. They're techniques, like we said, it's a skill set to learn how to dialogue and how to articulate with people. So if you slow stuff down, if you look to connect with people, to really work towards a goal, if you look to articulate your feelings in a different way, not to blame, but to take ownership. If you get clarity in your conversation, right? If you look at all times to be supportive and want to bring the best out of people and hope and pray that the best comes out of you, that if you remain prayerful and that if you really believe that you're trying to create community, then your communication can be a little bit better. Your communication will be a lot better, actually. And most of all, if you don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously, right? Because everybody's got feelings. Everybody's got thoughts. Everybody's got stuff that they go through. Everybody's allowed a bad day. Everybody gets a moment where they're not picked for the kickball team. Everybody gets a moment where they didn't make the cheerleading squad. And what I mean by that is everybody has those moments where they don't feel so special. And so when you seek to understand first, and before you get understood, you can come into conversation and dialogue and communication a little bit better. So I hope this blessed you. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope it was good. I hope it gave you some insight. We're going to keep going with this how you living thing, in the season of COVID-19. Next time we get together, we're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about space, and what boundaries are and what that means for us, and how we have space in tight spaces. How we have space in tight spaces. So listen, we're praying for you, and we hope that you're continuing to stay safe. Those of y'all who have to travel, those of y'all who have to move around, we want y'all to be careful out there and do what you have to do. So let's close out with a word of prayer. God, we love you and we thank you. We're grateful for all that you do, and we're grateful for the opportunity to just reflect in terms of our own communication. We pray, Lord God, that you would help us understand ourselves better as we continue to share with our family and our friends and those who we love. Help us, Lord God, to understand that you continue to do awesome things and awesome work. And so we pray for the New Calvary family wherever they are. We pray for our friends who watch us virtually and on social media. And we pray that this has always been a blessing and will continue to be a blessing to your people and your kingdom. And so, God, until we fellowship with each other again, we continue to pray for one another. And we ask for your power and your grace and your love. In all things, we say thank you. In the wonderful name of Jesus, we pray. We say amen and amen. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Y'all be good, man. Peace.